You're tuned in to the MtG Cable cast, where they cover Magic, the Gathering finance. All right? You don't know about it? You're tuned in right now and get ready to learn some shit. Buckle your seatbelts and light a blunt and get ready for the MtG Cable cast. Starring Reptar and Thirsty, them onion head motherfuckers.
Alrighty, guys, welcome to the news episode of the Cabal Cast. And this week, we're doing something that's kind of timely. We waited a little bit to talk about it because we wanted to see how things actually coalesced. And that is an announcement we were both excited about, that they were bringing back, or they were starting what is called the Magic Spotlight series. And obviously there was a ton of discourse over what was good, what was bad, what it means. So what we've decided to do is each pick a good and bad thing about the announcement from our perspective, and we're going to share them. So with that, let's take it away.
Yep. So for me, up top, the good thing, like the initial good thing that I thought of and all my locals thought of was we are finally being able to play standard for stakes. We will have meaningful standard events again. This basically allows Magic to kind of refocus the entirety of the game on its like quote premier unquote constructed format standard, and that makes it accessible to an overwhelming majority of players and also helps raise the stock of the game as being something competitive on the world stage. We've been a little narrow on that overall. This also helps reestablish the mantra of play the game, see the world. I think that's what it used to be, right?
Yeah.
And each spotlight series, because we have a handful of spotlights across the world, but more importantly, each spotlight series event will award all top 8 competitors a PT invite, which is a problem in the GP system that carried over into the Magic Fests. There was a lot of contention around what records got what for prizing in terms of cash, pro points, and invites, and so they kind of clocked this right here and said, okay, there are hard record cutoffs for everything, and we're just going to give out invites to the top 8, which makes it a lot easier and more accessible at the end of the day. In that regard, there's still going to be a mush between like 9th and 63rd or 64th in regards to payouts based on attendance, but that can kind of be figured out on the day. Overall, Magic has been missing a premier competitive format since almost War of the Sparks release in 2019, when the focus shifted from paper to arena before the pandemic. The first, I think it was Arena Showdown, was at PAX East with like day 9 hosting, and that basically was a market turn in the game, de-emphasizing paper in favor of a brand new digital client. And like that was cool and awesome, but they never really figured out how to bridge the gap from one to the other, or move both ahead in a meaningful way, and kind of splintered and fractured the professional Magic scene. And granted, it was for like only a couple of months before lockdown, so they didn't have to work too hard at patching it up. But
they got a lot of help.
Yeah, but it was not looking good from about 2019 until now. So overall, I think this is a really good low impact way of reminding people that there is more than just Commander for money on the line when it comes to playing Magic.
Yeah, it's funny, I saw a tweet today that says I'm literally wearing this shirt to the next Pro Tour, and it says Commander ruined Magic.
Oh, I kept seeing that today, yeah.
Yeah, I want to find that shirt, but I think this is, you know, look, Huey's been in the position for a while now. He, you know, we're starting to see his impact on things, and I think that's good. I think this is, you know, as much as I've harped on the show about, you know, they need to help the LGS, the competitive physical scene needed support too. And I think that that's something that also needs to exist for the health of the LGS.
Yeah.
And in that regard, I think this is, you know, a good bone that they're tossing. And, you know, my positive was, you know, and we usually go into these episodes blind of what the other is picking. Mine was, you know, they finally poked OP with a stick to make sure it's alive. And I think that this is, like you said, a very low impact way for them to say, hey, we haven't forgotten about you. We haven't forgotten the need for this, that we said this would be a thing, that we employed someone to do this who used to be part of this scene. And I think it is interesting, like you said, the problems from the GP have somewhat spilled over. But I like the transparency about what they're doing. And I understand there's going to be a crunch, 9 to 64. But again, like you said, you figure that day of. And realistically, most of the people that were competing for top 8, the top 8 mattered to them more. Like that invite mattered to them more than the money.
Yep.
The money was cool, but the invite's a way to go up the ladder, to show I'm better, whatever.
The colloquial turn of phrase is the train. You needed to get on the train somehow.
So you could,
Yep. Because that was your career at that point.
Yeah. That was how you got to live your dream of playing cards for a living. And, it's not like, realistically, I think we can all agree the esports bubble is effectively dead. So that's not going to happen. And it's kind of gone back to, hey, let's ride this physical train. Let's grind it out, 5 people to a 1-bedroom hotel room, 6 people to a car, if that's where we're at, or let's get our plane tickets if that's where we're at. Whatever the case is, this is now them kind of saying, hey, the train is back. It's here. We haven't forgotten about it. There's only one car, but it's here. So we can try to do something with it from there. And I think that, being conservative about it the way they were was smart. You don't want to pepper it like pre-pandemic. There were 3 GPs a month?
Yeah.
I don't think we can go back to that right away. And I think that this is a low impact way for them to say, yes, we're here. We're thinking about a train. We have a train. We'll see where it goes. Let's go. And I think that is a good thing that they have done because, and I'll touch on this later when we talk about our bats, that, if we want to get back to GPs, this is the way that we do that.
Yeah, for sure.
I think it's solid.
Your point of poking OP with a stick rings pretty strongly for me because as a judge in this area, I get hit with a lot of requests, and my RCQs are either standard or modern. Here and there, they are sealed if the format looks good enough, and my LGS knows that because people are coming out in droves on Wednesdays and Fridays, and that only happened for murders, and I have a sealed in October because it's the fall, so why not run Duskmorn, right? That's just kind of cool, kitschy thing for an RCQ. But it felt like we were just in a never-ending wash of Pioneer and Modern. What season is it? Doesn't matter. Same deck. Just keep playing it. And I could point to players that I kept seeing in my RCQs and tell you based on what event it was that day, what they were playing, because it was the same all the time and it felt really stale. And when you poke OP, something, we shake out something.
And I think this is, realistically, over the last couple years, this might be the healthiest Standard has been.
Yeah.
And I think that's another thing that says to me, okay, maybe they are paying attention because if you had run Standard when it was thrown, no, people would not have come out for that.
No, yeah.
Now we've had a healthy Standard for a couple of ban announcements where the meta keeps evolving, and you have your pillars, but new decks are coming and going all the time. And that is a good sign because, okay, if you're not only paying attention to OP, you're also paying attention to the Standard format, that feels way more like it did back in the extended days.
Yeah.
Than it has in a very long time.
Yep. And I'll say that what we're seeing in Standard before we move on to the bad, when you see a Standard metagame where a natural ramp deck is one of the best in the formats, you are generally in a pretty good place.
Yeah.
Nykthos ramp was not really a natural tenor for ramp. It kind of broke out of the tempo. When you can go like the Tron, I don't know what you want to call it, that like turn of phrase of 1-2-7, the coalesce shirt, right? Or you go like Elf untap with 3, rampant growth to 5 or 6 or whatever it is, depending on the rest of your hand. Like that's more of a natural ramp curve, and you can start playing your 7 drops like 2 turns early. That is a pretty good place to be for Standard because it means the control decks can still kind of play with a smaller mana base because their spells punch up, and the aggro decks can feast on a slow ramp draw or just on ramp in general because that's generally how it goes. And it really kind of espouses a clean, tidy standard environment that isn't just mid-range soup, or like even mono aggro standard can be decent as long as there are a number of options in front of you.
Yeah.
The Theros into Khan standard was all right when it was like Gruul monsters against Azor. Heroic's the wrong keyword, isn't it? The where you target. Yeah, maybe it is heroic.
I think it is heroic. Yeah.
Yeah. Like that was like that was a fine aggressive standard. And so
because you had give and take from those decks.
Yeah.
It wasn't just a. I go back to the Caw-Blade standard where it was Caw-Blade, Valakut, the decks that beat Valakut.
Mm-hmm.
That felt bad.
Yeah.
I know you're a Scape Shift player. I'm sorry, that was a bad meta.
I mean, look, it's a dead card in Modern. Valakut lives alongside Amulet now, no longer aside Scape Shift. Neither here nor there. But
True.
when we have this kind of ramp deck, kind of, I don't want to say running over the format, just based on the numbers, that's what it's doing. And I think that a lot of that has to do with the fact that people have owned these cards for a long time, which is what the longer standard rotations are meant to do. The rest of the format has to catch up because, as I talked about last week, there's like the Rakdos Lizards deck that's also coming up, and people are just kind of figuring things out and how they go.
Yeah.
When we turn a corner with Duskmourn and things get a little dicey, we just got a Pyroclasm spoiler, which could throw the aggressive decks under the bus and just kind of end that tenure there.
Yeah.
I would worry a little more, but Standard looks to be in a good place right now. So it'll be nice to see that as an RCQ format, as a format people play at like the highest levels, and actually have it mean something, have that information, that data, that success translate back into Grand Prix and back down into the LGSs, like you said, because people are juiced. They want to play Standard. It looks good. We have a reason to play it. Let's go. And that'll be really exciting. Insofar as the bad is concerned, mine is almost entirely based around the Judge program and what's going on right there.
Oh, I'm excited for this.
Right now, as the announcement reads, and I'll bring it back up again, next year, 2025, will feature 8 Magic Spotlight Series events in total. 5 in the United States hosted by Star City Games. 2 in Europe hosted by Fanfinity. 1 in Japan hosted by Big Magic. Cool, that's 8 different events around the world. Notably, we are missing the rest of North America, which includes Canada, not just LATAM, and a good chunk of the APAC region. And in this haze, WotC ended discussions with at least EU judges and has ended its recognition of external judge programs, i.e. Academy and Foundry. Now, that's not to say they won't pick them back up, but for the time being, we are not really in that WotC ecosystem. And I'll link a bunch of this stuff in the show notes. But we found out about this judge kerfluffle when Elliot Raff upcycled a tweet from a judge from Spain. Let me bring this up. Sergio Perez Marcos, we have been abandoned by WotC. We tried for over 7 months to get an agreement with them, and they finally said no. For a reason we don't understand, they seem to think the judge program will persist without them involved, despite the many efforts we made to explain it. It won't, and it goes on, and there's a lot more from Sergio, a handful from Masapo and other people. And Elliot upcycles this and mentions that Sergio is an L5 from Spain that's been doing this for decades. Pure and simple. Then Elliot actually went on to write an article that I will link on Commander's Herald, and he raises a good point in there of, based on numbers alone in the judges program, there's not a robust enough staff to even run the small number of events that WotC has listed. There are about 40 some, maybe almost 50 L3s, L4s, and L5s combined in the United States and North America, I believe. That's the sum total. That is not enough to run these events and train up the rest of the judges that are going to be needed for these events. You need a team that large at each one of these events, especially if you want to have side events. Jared Silva and Star City have been doing this long enough. They recognize what's going to happen, so they are probably just bolstering their ranks with 1s and 2s just from the Rolodex. But at the end of the day, this is going to be a problem, especially when, as we saw from Sergio, WotC has abandoned the EU and conversations with judges, which leaves it to, and I can't remember the name of the judge grouping in the EU. There's another one that's going on right now that's not Foundry. they're done. That's it. There's nothing more for them. And I'll leave the rest of this for everybody to read from Elliott's article, because he talks a lot about training and what happens when you have a staff of replacements effectively, and makes apt comparisons to professional sports and what you can see on field when you have basically trained individuals working alongside fill-ins. Notably, in most professional sports, those teams are put together the day of, so there's not a lot of time to gel, and what that means for teams and how that applies to judging. It's a really good article. I would recommend reading it. And for me, that is one of the worst aspects of this announcement, is that by forsaking the judge program, in no uncertain terms in Europe, it's just done, and not wanting to work with seeming at all Judge Foundry in the US, and I believe we extend to Canada, they are going to make these events really bad. And we already know that RCQs can be tough for people because of judge staff not available, and stores don't want to pay out, etc. There's that, yeah. So stores don't want to bring them in or don't want to pay appropriately.
Yeah, the judge thing is really bizarre to me, because it's not like the day before they made this announcement, they said, hey, let's announce this. They decided to announce this while they were also stopping negotiations with other judge organizations. Mm-hmm. And I understand there's one line in this that I think is very telling, and it is Magic Spotlight Series stops will also feature side events, vendors, special guests, and more at the discretion of the hosting organizer. I'm of two minds here. One, I wanted multiple organizers. I've been on record on the show as saying multiple organizers were better. You not like having a relationship with judges is really shitty.
Yeah.
And I understand there was a lawsuit. Fine. Man, it's your product. Your product. You make the rules for the game. You're not saying, hey, we make these rules. We want to train people to know these rules. This is, and there was I think it was last year at Yu-Gi-Oh! Worlds, there was an instance where there was a discrepancy between how something should work, because Yu-Gi-Oh!, some people may not know this, does not have comprehensive rules. It does not have a rules document that says this is how cards work. It was open to judge interpretation. Now we have a rules document, but because you're not training judges, it's open to judge interpretation. So there was an event in Yu-Gi-Oh! Worlds, which obviously you have to go through a lot of qualifying events to get to, where a player from Europe and a player from North America were playing each other. And they completely disagreed on how the card worked. They called a judge. It was an APAC judge who had a completely different interpretation of what that card did than what the other two did. Okay, now we're at an impasse. This is not a situation that should ever happen at an event. So the judge thing is, again, going back to them not requiring them for RCQs was kind of a problem for me. Another thing that is a problem for me, and this was something I immediately saw people saying, GPs are back, baby. All right, let's not get ahead of ourselves. They left out LATAM and Canada. They left out the majority of the APAC region, and I get it. They also left out South America completely. I get it. There's no Portuguese cards anymore. There is still a large contingent of players in Brazil who plays this game. You have Hall of Famers from Brazil, and you're just ignoring it. That sits poorly for me because, one, there are limited opportunities for people in those regions to play Magic competitively. I have a buddy who runs a store in Australia. He said anytime there was a Sydney GP, they would get people from China, they would get people from Russia, from India,
APAC
all over the place.
Anywhere they could.
Anywhere. And not including them is huge. So you've decided to have one in Japan, hosted by Big Magic. All right, that's fine. I don't think that has the capacity to hold everyone from APAC that wanted to go. I don't think it has capacity to hold everyone from Australia, everyone from China, everyone from Russia with whatever
whatever's left.
migration is there where your passports work.
Yeah, true.
It's just not enough for me to be convinced that these are GPs. For me to be convinced that, based on the tone of my good, WotC actually gives a shit. And it's just a little bit short for me. We've got a 2-day event, 50K prize pool, awesome. And like, obviously the invitations are there, that's fine, that's the train. But again, because you haven't included these regions or these countries, these areas, you've basically said, yeah, man, your train isn't good enough for us.
Yeah.
We'll sell our product to you, but you're not going to make money off it. Sorry. That just feels really bad as a grinder, a player, a tournament organizer, an outside observer. This just feels bad based on what we had before. And frankly, if these are just like Magic Fests, that's terrible. You have to do more than that. And I'm not sure that standard and a $50,000 prize pool is enough, considering Grand Prix were 5 figures to first at one point.
Yeah. 12 and 15 at least, I think.
Yeah, it doesn't look great.
Yep.
I don't know.
No, I agree with that. They pick their regions, obviously. Well, not even that. They pick the countries in Japan and the U.S. very specifically. Europe is obviously just kind of a like whatever, figuring out like your train system works for the most part. I was impressed that they didn't have any in Canada when FaZe has their own tournament series east to west across that country
that has really good turnout.
Yep. And they've done GPs in both Montreal. Actually, they've done Montreal, Toronto, and Vancouver.
Yeah.
Right. And I think they've even done a pro tour in Vancouver. One of them was there. That's a hop, skip, and jump from SeaTac.
Yeah.
So there's the opportunity for people to just kind of do a vacation up or down either way. Right. It's super easy. Same with Buffalo. You have the Falls. Montreal is just a historic city unto itself, so you have options there. Like, that blew my mind. I understand logistically South America is difficult, so you need to figure out that region and where you want to centralize. So I'm hoping that South America is one of the most immediate expansion points. I don't like that there's only one in the APAC region. There should have been another one either on the mainland or in Australia, because it's been fucking forever since Australia has had an event. I can remember that there was a Grand Prix Taiwan. I cannot remember the last time there was a Grand Prix in Australia.
Yeah.
And I think that needed to happen as well. And it's not like there aren't TOs to work with. You just gotta want to fucking do it. You know your cards sell there. You know people will go to these locations, especially if you pick vacation cities or vacation locations. So I don't like that there's 8 and they're so localized to basically the United States. That does give opportunity for one every month and a half, which is fine if you don't think you can do 10 in a year. 10 would have given the opportunity to put another one in APAC and maybe one in Central America or Canada. Yeah. And I think that would have been a better look overall. If they could have only handled 8, then I think pulling 1 or 2 from the US would have been fine, because I know Star City had a problem going west. If you were to go back and you were to look at the map at events that Star City did while the Grand Prix were happening, after
St. Louis was as far west as it got.
Not quite. They went out further. But the thing is,
they did Kansas City, OKC.
They went OKC. Eventually, they had to basically work with WotC and say, okay, we will be on the opposite end of the United States from you, so we don't draw like that. That was an agreement. But Star City did make it out. They did Salt Lake City. That was the first Gold Rush event they did.
Yep.
They wanted to draw people out because they knew the Grand Prix in that area were poopy. And yeah, they did somewhere in the Bay Area. I don't remember if it was Oakland or whatever. And I think that was it. They did maybe LA. They tried them. And people just didn't turn out in the numbers that they needed to ship all the kit out. So yeah, eventually they did start pulling in. And then the furthest west they would go was basically Dallas to like, it was like Cincy north of that. And like that was it. That was as far west as they would go. And then they would stick the East Coast in that, and they would just go back and forth between the two. So being the sole TO for the US and expanding west has a larger opportunity there if, and I hope it works out that way, that people understand that these are not events run by Star City for the purpose of Star City's own tour. These are effectively Pro Tour level events, because for the moment when Star City was able to give out Pro Tour invites, when WotC did that extension and the TCG Player Open Series got them, and like a number of the other independent organizers that ran large events got invites, more people didn't go out to compete at Star Cities. They just didn't. You didn't get the invites from the Opens. You got them from somewhere in the Invitational. Like qualifying had to be like either a points leader that made it to the Invitational or maybe top 8 of the NV. I don't remember.
Or something like that, yeah. Like top so many points and then top 8 of whatever.
Exactly, yeah. So if somebody could bring up that data, that would be fantastic. But you'll see that like people just didn't go out to these events. They didn't go to Star Cities despite the fact that we knew that like the talent pool there was more shallow. They didn't do that to grind to get to the Pro Tour. They went to Star City because they were already in that tournament ecosystem.
Yeah.
People seems to enjoy grinding more at the Grand Prix level for that challenge than they did than trying to work their way through the Star City event series. So I'm hoping that sticking with one TO, you mentioned more TOs, I'm hoping that sticking with one TO, one that's known for its tournament series only really, is not a detrimental aspect of this, especially as they go west to an area where we know they've had problems drawing before compared to the East Coast. So I'm really hoping that the locations they choose are ripe for travel. You know, LA is a pain in the ass to get to and from. Rest in pepperonis, that city, when the Olympics are there in 2028. But you could do, like, if you don't want to go to the literal West Coast, they're doing Vegas, I think, again. Star City, I think it's theirs. They could go SeaTac if they wanted to there. Those are fine draws. The Midwest is still ripe, so you can go like 2-2-4 if you want or whatever. And I don't have a lot more to say because I'm just going to start sticking on the same points. But I really do wish, like you said, that one TO that does this all, that has notably had a problem, doesn't really cause an issue inside the United States. And if it does, that's kind of a bad look when you had opportunity to move some of these events, extend them out of the U.S. to Canada, make it North America, go to FACE. Like, people will travel over the border to go play FACE events. Like,
absolutely.
You can get that.
The cities they have them are close. People go.
Yeah, like Minnesota's just South Canada. Like, there was a Magic Fest that we were both at. Like, people came down for those events. Like, same thing with Boston. It's not too far from Montreal. It's a flight or a 6-hour drive or whatever. People will make those drives. Yeah, if you can do that. And so conversely, the same people drive up to Montreal and Vancouver. So it's going to be a real bad look if they just put 5 in the United States, and like some of them are just absolute bullshit when FACE could have just crushed it with an event or two. Like, that's going to be a real weird and real bad luck. But I'm hoping these 8 bring us 10, bring us 12 next year, and we get back to the regionality we need, that we hit LatAm and South America, that we get more in the APAC region, that we get more into Canada and a couple more in Europe, like these underserved areas.
So, fun fact about Australian GPs. They used to average 2 a year, Sydney and Brisbane. The last one they held was the one Jessica Estefan became the first woman to win a Grand Prix in the team event. They had a Grand Prix Brisbane in 2019 that was planned. It got moved. To be combined with a Magic Fest. And then they announced the MPL changes, and that event in Australia got canceled.
God damn.
After Brisbane moved to Sydney to be with the Pro Tour, the Pro Tour didn't happen because the MPL changes hit, and Australia got axed. So this feels even worse for them.
Yeah, no, this is problems on problems, man. That sucks. Yeah. Like I said, the 8 events if you want to tow it this year. I agree, the regionality sucks. Expand it out. I'm hoping we get 10 or 12 the next year, and we start seeing more in these underserved regions, these regions that do have players that have professionals that need to be served. So,
would be great.
Pick time.
Yes.
Take it away.
I'll take it away. So this week, I am picking the Legacy Boogeyman. So the Legacy Boogeyman reads Dimir mana for a 1/2.
Innocuous 1/2.
Innocuous 1/2. Fine on its own, that doesn't seem too bad. And then it reads, whenever Legacy Boogeyman deals damage to a player or planeswalker, draw a card. Then you can discard a card to put a +1/+1 counter on Legacy Boogeyman. So we're drawing cards and putting counters on them when we discard. That's already pretty efficient and really good on a 1/2 body. It also says, exile 3 cards from your graveyard. Legacy Boogeyman gains flying until end of turn. All 3 of its abilities feed into each other. It grows bigger just by existing most of the time. And this is, of course, Psychic Frog. So Psychic Frog, a card from Modern Horizons 3, has turned into the Legacy Boogeyman that people thought might actually get hit with the Grief announcement. We got Grief instead. So, why this card? A few reasons. Right now, we're sitting at a market of, I believe it's $13, $14. The all-time high is 19, the all-time low is 4. So we're closer to the all-time high than the all-time low, which may make you think, why do it? Because I believe in this card long-term. Long-term. Let's say this card gets banned in Legacy. We'll operate under that assumption, and I'll tell you why I think it's good then. Because if it doesn't get banned in Legacy, it's even better. So why is it good even if it gets banned in Legacy? Because this is objectively, quite possibly, the most efficient creature ever printed that does not immediately scream, this card needs to be banned. The card's really good, but it can still see play in Modern if it's banned. It will see play in EDH and definitely see play in CEDH, because this is one of those good utility creatures in those formats that just helps you with all of the things those colors already do. And in CEDH, it's an insane advantage engine. It's a finisher, and it's just really good at what it does. I think that long term, this is going to be a riser from a, I believe, we're at like $13 low right now. Again, we're closer to the high. And if you look at the price graph on stocks, you can see that we petered off before that announcement and stabilized. Everyone was concerned it might get banned. I don't think that even if it gets banned in Legacy, it will impact the price too much. Deathrite Shaman's a perfect example. When that got banned in Legacy, I was buying them for 50 cents, which is insane to think about.
Yeah.
And
one
it
mono
did just
Planeswalker
fine.
is hard to buy at 50 cents. Like, come on.
Pretty good. Same with Mox Opal. When Mox Opal got banned, fell, took right back up because that card is good in other formats.
Yeah.
Deathrite Shaman is good in singleton formats, which is the only spot it's legal in, and it still has the price point it does. This is a card I see along that same line, and because Modern Horizons 3 was and is literally everywhere, I don't expect that this is something that we're going to see a lot of quantity evolve on the market. I think we will only see it dwindle from here. I also think that while this card is imminently reprintable, I think that it will probably be along the lines of Deathrite Shaman, where we'll see it periodically, thematically, but not enough to really damage the impact on the price, because the card is that good and because there's that much demand on the card. I think timeline-wise, that's where it gets a little bit tricky, because if this card does get banned in Legacy, it probably lengthens our timeline on this.
Yeah.
Now, I do want to say I've got 8 copies. That's all I plan to have. I don't want to get more. I just don't want to have to move that unless I'm out again to buy list, and I don't see this as something that buy list will be scant on, because this is one of those cards that just gradually rises. It's always on buy list, and it's always in stock. It's just how it's going to be. Now, if it gets banned in Legacy, we're looking at probably 1.5 to 2 years, at least. If it does not get banned in Legacy, I realistically see a point where, kind of piggybacking on the announcement, we may see a peak around Magic Showcase Modern in Europe. I forget, Netherlands. That's where it's at, which is March of next year.
Okay.
And that's when I could see this card start to take off, because if we see just an insane performance at a Showcase Spotlight Modern event, the kind of event that we want to unveil as the future of competitive Magic, I think we see this card go up considerably. And that is when I think we have our first chance to out for profit.
Yep, that makes sense. Taking a look at the set in general, this is not the most expensive card. It is the most expensive rare in the set, above all the fetch lands and Kozilek. I didn't know Kozilek itself was an $8 card. But Psychic Frog is a fantastic card, and I'll go through all the formats Singleton to newest. So in Commander, like, yeah, sure, this is a fine value engine. People played Psychotog for forever. Fantastic card. And this just replaces it hands down because it does similar
everything
things,
better.
but better, exactly. It just doesn't get bigger when you exile from graveyard. So there's that little bit of a neg. Then you have CEDH, like you touched on. This is a fantastic value card on the front, but the ability to ditch one card at a time means that you don't have to worry about casting your spells before you Underworld Breach. You can just dump your hand into Frog, Breach, and then cast it all back. So it's not just a good like card in the terms of body for rate versus effect. The ability to just discard your hand for free for 2 mana is incredibly important in that format.
Really good.
Yeah, making basically Jeskai into colorless is not the most difficult thing to do pretty early on, so like it runs rampant there. Vintage is currently changing after the ban list. As expected, Lurrus is the most successful deck because people are just copying and pasting right now, and the Esper Lurrus deck is playing Psychic Frog in the main, and Doomsday is sideboarding it in, I believe. So we already have people playing that card in the format right now, which wasn't there before. In Legacy, with the banning of Grief, the Dimir Tempo and Dimir Reanimator decks are still big, and basically people just pulled the Grief from them and are playing more mid-range pieces. And Legacy is still right now a copy-paste format. They're just trying to figure out, is there something better than Dimir Tempo, effectively? So Frog is in both of those decks. It is a sideboard option, and again, the Doomsday combo deck that is in Legacy. I pulled my Frogs and flashed the Grixis Delver deck that I've been playing because it goes straight into that deck as well, and it can be played in... people were testing Esper... I can't think of the name. Stifle Knot?
Oh yeah, I've seen that floating around. Yeah,
just another value piece. Cool, it goes in that list, so we can jam it there. Then in Modern, it has been in the Dimir control deck basically since like release of the set, and that was a weird deck. I don't know if I mentioned on Cast before, but it basically had a 50% win rate against the field and a 0% against Nadu. But people just jammed this deck incessantly, so it didn't matter how good the card was. People just wanted to play Dimir control. Cool, good for them. There is also some Grixis control floating around in both Modern and Legacy that don't really do well, but represent some people who are like, these are cards I own and I just can't not cast Snapcaster and Kozilek's command. Or Kolagon's command, sorry. So, that's what I'm going to do. And Psychic Frog basically it doesn't fill a lot of holes in a lot of formats. It just plays this really interesting role for formats that have really kind of missed Psychotog and needed a more efficient Psychotog to just kind of do things. Psychic Frog on the surface is a really good card, but when you compare it against cards like it that have been banned because of the card Delver of Secrets in Legacy, I don't remember who said it, but they basically said when you look at Dreadhorde Arcanist, it is embarrassing that Psychic Frog is not banned yet, because those cards are worlds apart in terms of power level, Psychic Frog being much better, and this card significantly, yeah, exactly, and it just lived through a BNR. But at the end of the day, Legacy is in a different spot now than it was when Dreadhorde Arcanist was in the format. Was it the last 2 mana creature or Planeswalker to get banned because of Delver, or was it Wrenn and 6? Either way, it doesn't matter. It's basically
Wrenn and 6 was after.
Okay, yeah, because of Delver, one of those two. But Legacy is in a much different spot right now than when we had Dreadhorde Arcanist. I think Frog is a really good look overall long term because, like you said, unless we just start cracking Modern Horizons 3 because Duskmourn is a dud and people want something to do, there's not going to be a whole lot more. And it's not like Legacy players are just going to dump cards that were staples unless they just kind of do get banned. And then the deck was whatever in Modern, but because people just wanted to jam Dimir, they'll probably just scoop them. And then it just continues to go up forever. And then if it does anything in the Modern Showcase, like you mentioned, it just goes up from
Skyrockets.
there. Yeah. Yep. It is a fantastic card overall. If you don't own them, you definitely missed a point where you could have got them for what was their cheapest, even when they were floating at like $8 each.
Yeah.
And if you play any of these formats, I would recommend you pick them up sooner rather than later, because these are eminently more playable than almost anything else in that set in a wide variety of decks. Everything else is more pointed and more specific, and this is the most agnostic card. Just fantastic. I also killed somebody who was underneath an ensnaring bridge because of Psychic Frog.
Swing. How many cards in hand? 1. Swing. Discard.
That's exactly what it was. It wasn't just. It was. I had to navigate. I had a a Darcy, a Dragon Race Channeler, and a Frog. So I had to exile enough from my graveyard to drop the Darcy from the sky, leave 2 different types in my graveyard, swing in with both of them, bolt to the face for 3 to put an instant in there, discard the last card to Frog. So now that's 5 from the creatures and 3 from the bolt for 8. Like, that's just ridiculous that you can do that. Like, you can just swing in, you can get in under the bridge to declare attackers and then just come right back over the top with flyers.
It's great.
Yeah, I know, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
It was awesome. This card does everything and more, and I'm a very staunch believer in it. So it's a good time to look at it now. It'll be a good time to look at it later. Get them while you can.
Yeah.
For me, I'm sticking with commander cards this week, and I'm starting with Cryptolith, right, for the next couple of weeks when it comes to commander stuff. And we're going to start out pretty easy. Cryptolith, not Cryptolith, right? Cryptothrall from Warhammer 40k is an artifact creature construct for 4 colorless mana. It's a 3/3, and it has a keyword that is just unnecessary. That just says other artifact creatures you control have hexproof. That's the text on it. So it's a 3/3 for 4 that gives all your other artifacts hexproof. Cool. CK's buying 23 at $1.80. There's when I was taking my notes, 69 listings on TCG Player with a market of 532. Right now, I think the market's on the way up, as we saw, to like 550. So we're seeing movement there. CK's kind of stalled on buy list, which is fine. I'll talk about that later. When I was taking my notes, when I added this in February, CK was buying 67 at $2.75. So we saw a drop off there. They had 4 at $5, but they have not really been able to either acquire any or hold them in stock, but they would have been selling them, I believe, for $4 each right now. And back in February, the TCG market, the 53 listings with a market of 577, so we've seen a dip, but a recovery. And when we look at Cryptothrall, we see a card that just is exactly what it says. It protects the rest of your artifacts. So we're looking to play Artifact Synergies or Artifact Typal, whichever it is, because it doesn't care if it's a creature or not. It just gives it hexproof. Fantastic. So when you take a look at Rex, we kind of see what we expect is that Cryptothrall's in the 99s, that decks that want to play artifact creatures and win with them by creating a sticky board. You can combo out and enter combat, or combo out and then, or just like make infinite widgets and wadgets and throw them. Generally, like when you combo out with artifacts, it involves making infinite creatures or putting infinite tokens on a walking ballista or something like that. So no matter what, you're kind of working with creatures, but you're just going to throw them if you want to combo out. So it doesn't really matter what you're doing because Cryptothrall offers a layer of protection in both instances because, again, other artifact creatures you control have hexproof. Like, that's just how we work. We're like, it just that
reading
easy.
the card explains the card
Yep,
in the most perfect way.
Yep. Effectively, the artifact version of Sterling Grove. Sterling Grove is a little more agnostic. Most enchantments were in creatures when Sterling Grove was printed, but here we are in this day and age. Most of the artifacts that do the heavy lifting are creatures. So we can kind of use that as our comparison point for both playability and adoption within the format. Grove is a much more narrow card. It has a Selesnya color identity, and it gives Shroud. Cryptothrall remains agnostic in color and gives hexproof, so that allows its controller to play a more robust game, being able to shift equipment around. You can play Cryptothrall and put boots on Cryptothrall to protect it because other artifact creatures you control. Cool. It just is. It does more than Sterling Grove because Shroud is a much more limiting keyword than hexproof is. As a blanket, quote, protection spell, unquote, it's difficult to kind of upcycle the idea that there's something people are missing. I think the low adoption rate, when you look at the numbers on EDH Rec of Cryptothrall compared to something like Sterling Grove, comes from a number of problems, in quotes. The lack of visibility. I haven't seen any content creators play this card. Similarly, this was in the 40k product, which had much more flashy cards, so it never really got any shine in comparison. The quote self-reporting unquote crowd seems to have just listed decks built around 40k commanders that play this card, so they're basically just listing the decks 1-to-1 and then just clicking on the commander that they chose from the face ones. And that same crowd doesn't represent many of the most artifact commanders that we actually see. Only Urza Chief Artificer from Brothers War Commander and Card Legacy Reborn from March of the Machine Aftermath are the real overlaps between the EDH Rec theme of artifacts and decks that Crypto Thrall shines in according to Rec. But again, most of those artifact themed decks are playing creatures because that's the combo engine in it. You're animating something, you're twiddling it, it's a widget, it's a wadget. You're comboing with Scrap Trawler and Mirror Retriever to just go through. They're both creatures. You got to do that kind of stuff. You're going to be animating with Karn, doing all this other stuff. This is the card that protects the group. So this really is just a spotlight on this card because it should be seeing more play, but it just needs a real push to kind of get going at a faster rate than we're seeing right now. From a timeline standpoint, sadly, this sells about 3 copies a day on average, but that number is generating sales ranging from 1 to 7 per day. So it could be 1 day, 7 another, 1, 1, 1, and when you average it out, it's about 3 a day. So it's like really weird and streaky like that and very difficult to predict, but 3 is the average. There are 254 total copies on TCG Player right now at LP or better, so it'll be about 3 months to kind of sell through, maybe a little more if people realize this is going up in price and shove just to get in at the low.
Yeah.
There are a number of anchors that do represent a stepwise pricing, so as they are pulled, we meet a new stable price, which is really nice because that means it'll be a gradual rise in price, not a vertical jump. So like, let's say when the first plug is pulled and this goes up from $5.50 to $6, it's going to be there for a little while before the next like brick of 20 is pulled. And now it's a $6.50 card. Then it's a $7 card. That's the kind of movement we're looking at, just a stepwise pattern, like which will create a nice flowing chart on stocks. We're not looking at like a straight vertical like we do some other times. So the best option overall would be to pull some from these anchors for the moment, as their cost plus shipping is generally cheaper than a lot of options for like 1s and 2s, and then you can relist them either immediately and wait or sit on them and wait. It doesn't really matter. Buy lists are lagging as expected because sales velo is low. Again, 3 copies on average a day. But because sales velo is low and the price increase is steady, either there's going to be this kind of system shock to buy lists in the future and their price will rocket up because of the low velo. Their price will rocket up, or because of the low velo, they just won't care. So either, as they see it, they haven't had any in, so nobody can buy them, and we'll just ratchet the price up little by little. Then all of a sudden, this is an $8 card, and your $3 buy list isn't doing shit. So that's the system shock, where it goes from like a $3 to a $7 buy list because they've missed all these sales by not pegging to market. That's the system shock that we could see. Or like I said, because sales velo was so low in the past that they just don't care at all, and they'll offer zeros on this card effectively and just scoop when people sell a collection. No skin off their back. So either way, I wouldn't consider them buy lists as an out for any of these. I would go right back into TCG Player because of that. Reprint equity on this one is kind of weird because Crypto Thrall is tied to 40K, and that license has proven an issue even for Moto. So I would expect we don't see any kind of universes within for these cards in general, and that kind of insulates us because it took forever to get like Chaos Defiler and Triumph and St. Catherine on Moto, and the legacy metagame on Moto was irrelevant for
it didn't matter.
A year or something like that. It just did not, like, there is no parallel. We were just kind of lost at sea as legacy players because we couldn't make we couldn't bridge from paper to Moto, and that was a licensing issue and nothing more. I'm pretty sure we covered that on the podcast. And so because of that, unless they negotiated behind the scenes and to the point where we can get a reprint of this thing, I think we're insulated on any of our 40K picks, from here on out. By quantity, honestly, straight up, this is basically a non-playable in Legacy, so I don't own any of them. I didn't even know about this card until I started watching it in February, and I held off on it because I didn't really see it doing a whole lot, and then it just kind of tanked for a little bit and started to become a really recent riser. And so now it's like, okay, I got to go back, I got to reevaluate. And while this is a card that I would like to hold on to for a little bit, I would like to hold some of these. I just don't have any right now.
Yeah, I love this card. It's anecdotally, one of our CEDH players plays Shimmer Zur, and he started running this for the gotchas. And sure enough, Shimmer Mirror goes out, resolves, somebody tries to swords it, and he flashes in Crypto Thrall.
Yeah.
Everyone at the table was like, yeah, man, I can't be mad at that. You got it.
Yeah, you
did it. But yeah, I think this is, the really alluring thing here to me about this, and said at the very end, we're really protected from Warhammer 40k reprints. That is the only Universes Beyond that they have specifically mentioned licensing issues for. They've said there's a lot of licensing issues with Universes Beyond, but the only one that they have specifically called out that I recall was Warhammer 40k. I don't think this is a license that sold well. I mean, look at Lord of the Rings comparatively.
Yeah.
If given the choice between bringing back Lord of the Rings or Warhammer 40k, I don't care how much more Lord of the Rings cost. It's clearly worth it. Mm-hmm. That's the one I'm revisiting. And I wouldn't expect to see this in a Universes Within unless, please know, we go back to Mirrodin again. Or something similar. That's the only spot I could see a Universes Within, and we're not doing that anytime soon. So I like this card a lot. It's efficient. It does what it does incredibly well. And I think you're right about the visibility and the adoption is, everyone that self-reports, oh, it's just, here's an upgraded 40k deck with like 10 different cards in it.
Yep.
All right, cool. That doesn't really say a whole lot about where this would actually see play. And you're like, Esper artifacts, your Memnarchs, your Bosches, like there's plenty of decks where this could see play and be incredibly good that self-reporters just haven't put out there.
Yeah.
And I think that, obviously it's not the fastest seller, but I think that contributes to the low visibility because there's not a lot of finance people looking at it without liquidity. And I think that makes this a really good opportunity to get it on, basically like a savings bond in MTG Finance. I know this is steadily going to go up. Cool. I'm just going to sit on it till I'm ready.
Yeah. And like one of the silliest things is like Urtat is all about creatures. That's the Mirror Lord. According to Rec, when you're looking at Crypto Thrall, there's not a single Urtat deck that's playing this. Like you are 100% a creature deck. Same with Tetsun, the Jeskai gnome thing, entirely a creature deck. Where are you with that one? I just don't. There's some of these commanders you look at, you just don't get it. Like it's in the Sir Ginger deck and it's in the Liberator deck, but at really low adoption rates because of the way EDH Rec is set up now. You can see it's the top commanders are sorted by percentage of decks that contain the card, not by the number of decks overall. So 94% of Scarith decks play this. 81% of Anorak, Imhotep, Illuminator Xeris, Trazen. Those are 5 Warhammer 40k decks, and the top 6 contains just Karn Legacy Reforged to break that up. That's it. So yeah, exactly. Like you said, people are just representing these decks, maybe changing cards. I think they're just putting up the face commander. It's just a 1-to-1 list.
Yeah.
I'm not giving them any more credit than that. Like honestly, and that's kind of the thing. The weird thing, and I just noticed this now, and this will be the last thing, is there are a lot of Doctor Who decks that are playing this card, and I don't know why. There's 1, 2, 3 Doctor Who commanders that are playing. I get it, like
Cybermen.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Ding, right there. 2 of them, Ashad, the lone Cyberman, and the Cyber controller. Like, cool. It makes sense because it's just an artifact nerd. And then Cult of Skaro, which is the Dalek commander. Because again, just trash cans with legs. Like, thematically it makes sense in those decks. And I think that might be what a lot of like those 3 in particular are. Like,
this is thematic. I'll include it.
Yeah, here's my Gonk droid. It's just a trash can with legs. Like, in that. And so that kind of self-reporting crowd isn't really doing us any help. We need people who want to play like the higher end stuff, like I mentioned earlier in this, the Urzas and the Karns on stream.
They want to play for stakes.
Yes. But a lot of people also dislike the widgety-wodgety pulling levers kind of artifact deck because no matter what, they end up going infinite. So it's a little difficult to play at the table, so I get that. But That's my pick for this week. Crypto Thrall.
Solid.
Anything else before we head out?
Yeah, my week 1 pick is for the Eagles to lose because the Cowboys certainly won't win.
That's fair. Oh, divisions. So for at MtG Cabalcast on Twitter, Facebook, Patreon, and YouTube, I am at Haltai and Reptar. You are
At Damon_Thurston.
We'll see you next week.